On behalf of JMRL, I want to thank Albemarle County for this partnership and series of community reads. We're so happy to assist with the distribution of books. And JMRL has been offering an annual community read and book discussion groups for years, and through the pandemic, they've been very popular. We've found that community reads encourage a cross-section of people of all ages and backgrounds to read and discuss something that might be outside of their normal interests. They read something different. This allows us to learn more about each other, promoting empathy, engagement, and a greater understanding of the diversity of experiences we bring to a given topic. And of course, it also promotes literacy, fostering an appreciation of books and reading, which of course the library loves. We look forward to continuing to assist with promoting and distributing books throughout this series. And I'm happy to say distribution of future books will be easier, as JMRL will be open to patrons starting this Monday, the 17th. So demand for this particular title, The Monacan Indians, Our Story, has been high, particularly at the Northside Library, and we've been very happy to partner with you and to get these books out to the community. So I look forward to the discussion of The Monacan Indians, Our Story by Corrine Wood and Diane Shields. Thanks again for including the JMRL Library in this process.
Thank you, Krista, for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. To the attendees and the panelists, we're grateful for your time. We are very lucky to have a great group of people here to discuss and help us make sense of this book. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And so the questions I have for you, just to get the introduction started, is, tell us your name, your role or your connection to the Monacan Nation. And then just to get this started, I know some of you have answered this before already, like what kind of response do you hear from people when you say you're Monacan, when you introduce yourself as Monacan, or you say you work with Monacans? So whoever wants to get started.
I will.
Go ahead, Diane.
Okay. Usually when I let them know that I'm Monacan, they want to know, how much Monacan are you? They act like you're supposed to designate a part of your body that's Monacan and the other part isn't. So I always tell them I'm all Monacan.
And then will you also tell us your name and your connection to them?
My name is Diane Shields. I'm currently the chair of our Monacan Nation Cultural Foundation, which encompasses our food bank, our youth group, our powwow, our museum. So it keeps me pretty busy. I'm also treasurer for the tribe. So that in itself is a busy job.
And I also want to say that Diane is the co-author of the book we all read. An important piece of information for us to know.
Thank you. I have with me today our chief, Kenneth Branham. He's with us today.
Hello, how y'all doing?
Is it possible for you to turn on your video, Diane?
Yeah, let me see. I thought my video is on. It says, do you? No, I don't want to do that. Oh, hang it. There it is. How's that? There we go. Now you can see.
Yeah, I'm beside her. I'll get a little bit closer.
There we go.
My name is Kenneth Branham. I'm the chief of the Monacan Nation. And Diane and I have been working for about 20 years. When she came up from Florida, I was the chief at that, assistant chief at that time. And since then, she and I have held many different titles in the tribe, but right now, Diane's over the 501c3, which if you look at it, is the Monacan tribe before we got federal recognition. So she's still doing a lot of the things that she was doing even before federal recognition, but with that is added pressure. And of course, I'm retired, and thank God I am, because I couldn't do the job as chief if I wasn't.
Thank you for being here. Teresa, do you want to go next?
Nahan PP, Teresa Pollock, Makila Kewa, Mima, Monacan Yesa. My name is Teresa Pollock, and I'm a member of the Monacan Nation. I have held a lot of leadership. I was on council, I've been secretary. I am just a tribal citizen who helps support our members. The thing that I get most when people find out that I'm Monacan, because I have red hair, they're like, "Oh, you look more Irish than you do Indian." But I'm Monacan, so that's the gist of it. So I did not help write the book. Mom and Karen wrote the book. I came after, and you know, the whole participated in all of the stuff that we've had to do to achieve federal recognition. And it's been a long process, and it's been quite an interesting developments over the years, and definitely a lot to do with federal recognition. As the chief said, that the you know, we have the federal side, which is basically setting up a small city on the federal side, and then the 501c3 is our charitable organization that has our museum and our historic schoolhouse and the food bank and cultural items that we do with the 501c3. Matt?
I'm Matt Latimer, and I'm a member of the Monacan Nation. The thing that said to me most when people find out that I'm Monacan is pretty much what everyone else has said. Well, you don't look like one, or how much Monacan are you, or also I've also heard I've never heard of Monacans before. I've heard that as well. So those are my two.
Thanks, Matt.
Sure.
Jeff, you're on. You're muted though.
About now.
There he is.
First, I want to say hello to everyone. Diane,
Hi,
Kenneth,
Jeff.
Matt, Teresa. It's great to see you guys. And a real honor and a pleasure to sit on this panel with you. I miss you. It's been a tough year, but a great, a lot of successes. So, who am I? I'm someone I'm not Monacan. I'm a retired professor from the University of Virginia. About 30 years ago, I introduced myself to the Monacan people and had some history to share with them. And for a few years, that's what I did. And I would say somewhere along the way, I became more the student and the teacher. And I've learned so much from working. Forgive my voice today, but I've just learned so much from working, being allowed, having the privilege of visiting the Bear Mountain community and learning about the Monacan Nation. What do people ask me at the University of Virginia, all these knowledgeable people with their degrees? 30 years ago, they would say, what's Monacan? So you're working locally with local, like, what does that mean? That was 30 years ago. Nobody says that anymore. I'm proud. I've written a book on the Monacan people. It's a lot of people are buying that book, and there's great interest in the Monacan tribe. And I'm speaking too long, but no one asks me anymore. They ask, how's the fight at Rasselwick? What's going on? When's the powwow? And the transformation of the last 30 years that I've been privileged to watch from the sidelines has been just like unbelievable. So read the book, because it takes you right up.
Your grandmother is blocked on the Zoom. What does that mean?
Did I
Thank you,
say
Jeff.
something wrong, Diane?
No, you didn't. No, they're talking to me about my sites being blocked by Zoom. No, Jeff, you did everything great, and you become family to us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Why are you lying, Mom? This is being recorded, Kaylee.
Oops. She
Little
says I'm.
family drama right there. Nice to have generations here.
That's right. That's
but-
what it's all about.
Exactly. So Jeff, you sort of like took us straight into the first question I have for you all, but starting with Diane, since you, wrote the book,
Okay.
This was, the first time it was distributed and printed was more than 20 years ago. So will you tell us a little bit about what was happening then and what was the purpose of writing this book? And others can chime in after that, but.
Okay, like Kenneth said, I moved here in 1993 and I started working with the tribe. At first, I started with Phyllis Hicks, who was working on our museum. And then we continued to have meetings and everybody wanted to work towards federal recognition. And of course, that is a monumental task. So Karen Wood was able to write a grant through A&A, the Administrative for Native Americans, and we've received a grant to do research for our community. And that grant lasted 4 years, and it took us 4 years, or maybe actually it took us more, but the grant took us through all of that research that we had to do to document our community and actually who we are and how much Indian are you and why are you still where you are and how did you get there and all those types of things. So that's what we originally started working on, was our federal recognition petition. So it was created and it was about 3 or 4 inches thick by the time we finished. So we decided for our people, for some of their information to be more available to them, was to put it into a book. And we worked to condense as much as we could, but to give them enough to encourage them to want to learn more about the history. Because of course, the history of the Indian people in Virginia is not taught, really. You just have the very basics. So, and a lot of our people lost their history, even though they lived in the same place and went to school at a log cabin schoolhouse. But the instructors were, of course, white people that came to teach what they knew to teach. So our children lost the knowledge of who they were and who their families were and their ancestors were. So that's why the booklet ended up being created. It came after our federal recognition packet was finished.
I would like to add a little to that. I grew up here my whole life in Amherst County, and I went to the log cabin school up through the 3rd grade. And yes, the teachers that the county provided to teach us were good, but like Diane said, they taught us what they knew. And we lost a lot of our indigenous ways. And I asked my grandmother one time after we started researching the history, why didn't she and the others teach us more about being Native American and Monacan and Pacific? And she told me with tears in eyes that if the wrong people heard a elder or our parents telling us that stuff that we needed to know, they may not have a place to live that night. Very few of our people own their own house or property. So, we lived in subpar homes. I never lived in a house that had running water or electric heat or anything like that until I was married and living in the house I am now. And I was in my early 20s. So, running to the creek to get a bucket of water to take a bath in. I always joke with my kids, you never lived until you wake up in the middle of the night and you got to go to the Johnny house, which is up on the hill, so we did lose a lot of that type stuff, but that was the way it was. People in the county, they knew who we were, but they didn't want other people to know it because of what they were doing to us.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to add something to that? Okay, then I'm going to ask another question about the book. So it spans a huge amount of time, right? It starts with the 1600s and then goes all the way until 2000. And so my question is, why was it so important to cover such a large historical period?
Well, I can answer that again, because this booklet was generated off of the research we did to document who we were for federal recognition. It's very important that we go back as absolute as far as we can, back to John Smith, who showed us on the map. And Razowick, who right now we're working to say Razowick, was documented on that map in 1608 or 1612, I'm not sure. But it was real important that all of our people realize, yes, there's the history. Yes, that proves we actually are who we are, not what the dominant society or the government at that time tells us who we are. This shows us we've always been here. This is who we are. That's why that history, the pieces of history, the different things that were documented, like the Evans map in the 1700s, also documented us into the same place. It's very important that our people know we've always been here.
If I can anticipate one of your other questions, how is this an Indigenous history? A lot of people in my field write history and they start 12,000 years ago, and that's important. That's interesting, and it documents the deep and deeper than that. That's how far back the radiocarbon dating will take us to the artifacts, but it could be timeless. But then at 1607, academics and textbook writers especially leave the story. There's a few pages about the meeting of Algonquian people, the Powhatan people, and the English, and the Monacans they're not even talked about anymore. So when you say this is a long history from 1600 to 1999 and really continuing to 2021, the Monacan people knew that was the story that needed to be told. I have a fond memory. I think Kenneth and Diane have heard me tell the story too often, but when I spoke about Monacan history, it kind of left off after 1607, where I thought the Monacans were really powerful, and isn't that a great story? And Sharon Bryant, former chief Sharon Bryant, just looked at me and said, "And what happened next?" And I said, "Oh, well, I thought I had a good story there around 1607.
Yeah.
Sharon was right, and Diane and Karen answered that question. So it's really what's important, and it's what's important to the BIA also, and for federal recognition, is to document that continuity from 1600 to the present. That's what they did. I never would have done it. I stand in awe of what that book did. I really do. And it worked.
It did.
Work. Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight for people listening, in case it's not clear, that in order to get federal recognition, you had to prove this, like that Monacan people have continued over time from the 1600 onwards, from that first documented meeting, and have stayed in the same period. So all of that sort of had to be part of the book. In addition to the story you were telling to your people, it was also the story you had to prove to then the federal government or the
Absolutely.
outsiders.
Yes.
Matt, did you want to say something?
Well, I think, yeah, for me, kind of, I guess, going off of what Jeff was talking about, just as a Monacan, it was really important, and it was a proud thing to read history as was written by Monacans, because as Indian people, we get everyone else's version of history all the time, and that's what it is. It's his story, and this was something that, for me, and of course I didn't have anything to do with writing the book or anything else, but reading it was really a point of pride, and knowing that our people did the work on that, really something.
And you know, history is usually written by the victors or the dominant society. And, you know, when you're in that position, you're going to make yourself look good. So, you know, you can go back to the old history books and see things that happened between the European and Native people. And, you know, they always paint the Native people in a bad picture. But with this being written by a Native people, it tells the whole story. And I know Diane and Karen put a lot of effort into making sure that they presented the facts, not their opinions. And a lot of times history is you know, it covers the facts, but a lot of opinions are in there, and it's usually the dominant society making themselves look good. History is not always pretty, but it should always be right. And this book helped get some of the truth out there that has been covered up before. And I'm very proud of it. And Diane and them did an excellent job. And you know what? The federal government paid for that. And we weren't federal recognized at the time.
That's true.
But they thought enough about their proposal to pay for it. And it was a 2-year grant, and they did it twice. And I think we're the only tribe in Virginia that has gotten it 2 times in a row.
Oh, good to know.
I would just like to say that, you know, traditional Native people, we didn't write our stuff down. Our information was given orally, transferred from, you know, grandparent to children and such. And so in order to create that whole timeline for the federal government to say, oh yeah, you are who you say you are, you know, we had to go by whatever they could dig up in the historical archives. And you have to go back so far, and you know, we're spoken about, and then we disappear. But we didn't really disappear. We were always here. Our ancestors were always here. And you know, it may be not spoken about, but we were here. They were here. They survived. They moved. You know, they were secluded in the mountains, and you know, that's where our community, our heart is. There, down at our tribal center, at the schoolhouse, at the, you know, the church down there. And if it weren't for those records, you know, of the schoolhouse, you know, we wouldn't be able to put together a viable role in order to satisfy the needs of the federal government to say who we were.
I want to add to that, Teresa, you're correct, absolutely correct. And at the time when we were working on these things in the 90s, you didn't have Google, you didn't have the internet to do your research. You got in a car and you drove to where you needed to go to research stuff. And believe me, we burned up a lot of gas, but we got it done.
That's a favorite memory of mine is I was allowed to work through files that were in the museum, in the office, not having to do with what you were working on, but just things you thought I should have a look at. So I'm sitting in the museum a couple of days a week, and you and Karen would come back to that office, exhausted. And that it's a small booklet, but small is good and it's powerful. And that was a lot of legwork. From Emory and Henry College up to Richmond, from Orange County to Amherst, and every place in between. And if I remember correctly, a lot that was not to be shared, the genealogical information that belongs to the tribe and not really for public consumption. Some of it, yes, to document the continuity, but courthouses, deed record books, church records.
Yes, all that.
I don't think I've ever written about watching you do that work, but I'd like to someday because it was heroic. And you too.
Thank you.
Teresa, your mom. Incredible.
Thank you, Jeff.
he's told me about this before. So, but it's still incredible to think about, like for those of us in this era doing research, it is that, Google, all these interconnected libraries online, like makes it so much easier. And to imagine to have to, and as Teresa was saying, part of, and what I've learned from talking to you all and reading Dr. Hammond's book is Monacan people, I know this wasn't a question I sent you, but it's people, you sort of stayed away in many ways, tried not to engage with the colonizers very much. So there were all these times when you disappear from the written record. So the challenge of then finding those small mentions, that is very impressive work, and just incredible to be able to share that. And so moving to the other question I have is that you did find there are all these laws and treaties and sort of like mission work and names that you bring to this book, very specifics of, where the Monacan people are found in this archive. And so not going, back for the centuries that you've written about, but for all of you, I'm just wondering if there's one example of something that you can talk to us about, like a law or an alliance, partnership, the mission house, the schoolhouse, whatever, like something that you think has had a really big impact on the Monacan people for the last century. And it can be both positive or negative. So
I would say that the thing that I found amazing was that our people actually signed a treaty in 1677. The Indian people of Virginia treated with England at that time. Yeah, the Middle Plantation Treaty, and that the Indian communities were supposed to each get a reservated area for their people. And the fact that the Pamunkey and the Mattaponi did get their reservated area. And in that treaty, I think it stated something about that the colonists couldn't come within 3 miles or something of their reservation. And what I find amazing is that England actually treated with us, but the colonial government did go along with this treaty because they approved of the reservations that were already created. But the rest of the Indian communities never got their reservation. And I'm just wondering, I think about this often because my mind goes off. If we actually treated and the colonial government did approve or did uphold that treaty, is it still in effect for the other Indian people? That's a thought of mine quite often. I think of a lot of the history stuff that was actually done that's been pushed aside. And unless you actually research, nobody would know that. Nobody would have any clue that we actually had a treaty because, of course, none of us or none of the Indian communities treated with the United States government. None of those treaties have upheld, so.
Well, the Plantation Treaty that Diane had on was with England. And when the United States of America came about after the Revolutionary War, the Native people didn't disappear. They were still here, but our numbers had been drastically reduced. And the new government didn't see a necessity to recognize us. But, in 2007, when we went to England, they still recognized us as sovereign nations because we had a government-to-government relationship with England. And they still recognized that. And, I was chief and I was proud of that fact. We were fighting to get federal recognition here, and they wrote a letter in our support saying, we recognize the Virginia Indians, why don't you? And, I think that may have changed a few people's thinking about us. Here's a whole country that recognizes them. Why aren't we? And we're living inside of the USA. One place that I think had held the Monacan people together is the small church that is still operating today, and that's next to the school buildings. If it wasn't for that small church built in 1908, there wouldn't be a Monacan tribe today, in my opinion. Definitely not as we know it. And I doubt very seriously if it would be federal recognized.
Thank you for those examples. Those are great.
I think the biggest legislation that hindered not just our community, but all the Native communities was the Racial Integrity Act. That damaged our communities, devastated it by creating paper genocide to the Indigenous peoples of Virginia. And a lot of our people, in order to marry or have children or to better themselves, they left our community. They went outside where they wouldn't be persecuted for being, who they really are. So I think that in and of itself really did damage to the Indigenous population of Virginia.
And
Ask you about this one in more detail later. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff or Matt. I don't remember.
what Teresa is talking about is that the racial integrity law of 1924, Walter Plecker, John Powell, two very powerful people in Virginia, basically stated there were only two races, white and everybody else was called colored. So, that was the law in the state of Virginia until 1969. And, that caused a lot of our people to move away. And, they recognized the Monacans basically by the last name. And, I know Monacans that just moved across the river and changed their names for Brownham to Brown, Johns to Johnsons, and that wasn't unusual to hear families doing that. But we had a lot of people that moved to Tennessee. We had a large group up in Maryland, Glen Burnie, in that area, and they're still there today. And there are satellite groups of Virginians living in other states.
It's interesting, it was interesting to me to actually see the list that was put out by Walter Plecker of last names by county, to registrars and people like that would register births and things, and see family names on that list. And it's amazing. It was just amazing, the first time that I saw that is just the depth of effort that was behind that law, and then how many people, how many Native people it affected in Virginia, and really honestly still does affect, in one way or another.
Can I pick up on Matt's last comment? Walter Plecker died in 1946, but his impact was felt to the present, and was the work he had done, the lies he had told, the birth certificates and marriage license, he had changed without authority, proper authority. That affected the federal recognition effort, but it was changed, but it took a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I will just never forget what impact this one person have had. When I first spoke in the Monacan Community Center to the tribal council and a fairly large group of people, I mentioned Walter Plecker. I said, but one of the things I can do is bring a history that puts Walter Plecker into perspective. And everybody got up and left. And I thought, uh-oh, what did I do? And Phil Hicks, God bless her, came over to me and said, Jeffrey, that man's dead. And we don't talk about him. We don't keep him alive. And I got it. And but for 15 years or so that I knew, his name was not mentioned, it was taboo. He was that ugly. His impact was that great. I did hear from people who were wanted to tell the story of having children in Lynchburg General Hospital, and the people my age who had babies in the 60s, and the nurses were still affected by their training under Plecker. And so when they went to fill out, as still was required, what is the race of this baby? The nurse would decide, not the mother. And luckily that changed. But I also said to Phyllis, Plecker, that was a long time ago. And I started learning lessons right away. Phyllis said, no, it wasn't. And the impact is still felt, although clearly the Monacan people have won that fight, even to the point of not having to pay $5 to change a birth certificate. That's a great moment. So.
Can I speak to that, Jeff? I'll follow you on that.
Please.
When I moved here in the 90s, after being here several years, because of course I was an outsider at first. It took people a while to know who I was and what I was doing and why I was doing it and that. And Karen and I started our research, and I worked to document our enrollment procedures for our people. And one of the biggest problems I had was people bringing their birth certificates in because of the way they were labeled. So needless to say, that was my next fight with Richmond and the Department of Vital Records to say, this is not acceptable. These people need to have their records changed. And of course, at first we had to pay. And of course, then I had to prove, again, I had to prove that they could have their records changed. So I had to secure their parents' records, their school records. One time, I even had to go to court with a gentleman. We got legal aid to help us because his mother was still alive. And Richmond would not issue him. He did not even have a birth certificate. They would not issue him a birth certificate. I had school records. I had baptismal records. I had doctor records, all of those things. And we had to go to court, and the judge had to do a court order to Richmond to issue this man a birth certificate. And his mother sat right next to him in court. And the judge just couldn't believe it. And I think today, even a lot of judges and a lot of people in higher job can't believe that we've had to go through those things, but we did. And we've gotten these things fixed so our people can not be afraid to say who they are and to be able to show the documentation. And then of course, we finally got the law passed that they didn't have to pay to have these corrections done, which is great. But the amount of paperwork that I would have to get for these individuals, again, to continually prove who they were, and they knew who they were. That's all.
I've heard Teresa mention this before, like that not just Monacan people, but Virginia Indians.
Yes,
had
all
to,
Virginia.
like,
Yes, yes.
prove. You couldn't just say who you were. You
Right.
really had to go to battle to like claim
did.
that identity.
You
and
did.
for a long time, you couldn't do that for fear of all these negative repercussions. And one
Correct.
of the things I've learned from this book, from conversations with you, is that this racial integrity law was an inspiration for then, the Nazi Holocaust later on. In the
Yes,
century,
yes.
which
It was
is a horrific
mentioned.
legacy.
Right.
But you all have touched on this, but I maybe just to pull this thread a little bit more, this law technically it affected all races in that they were not
Yes.
allowed to intermarry.
Yes.
But it was particularly harmful for Monacan Indians, but also other Virginia, because it disrupted this continuity that you had to show in order to gain federal recognition, right? Because it suddenly like people disappeared from these
Right.
genealogies.
Well, Matt mentioned the hit list that Plecker did. So, and every tribe had that. That was issued out to all of the electoral people, within the community, then the county people. These are the people that are trying to get their birth certificates changed or trying to marry under this marriage license. And let me just say, back in I don't know what year, one of the teachers at our school married a Monacan man.
Yeah.
They had to move away because you didn't marry a white person and an Indian person. You didn't do it. So they had so much pushback and they had to leave. So those are the things.
1916, so it wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't that long ago. Yes.
And I remember thinking this, but I want to map the point of that list. Like, it's incredible because he knew that these were Indian people, and still like the effort that went into identifying and then saying, no, we're going to make sure this identity no longer exists. It's incredible.
The state had sent a photographer out to document all of the, what were then called the colored schools. And that collection of photographs exists at the University of Virginia.
Yes.
Long before Plecker, when that photographer got to what he called Falling Rock or Bear Mountain and documented the school, the mission school, he's without question, he said, this is an Indian school. And so and on the United States Geological Survey topographic map, the Indian mission is identified. That's before Plecker came along.
That was.
So no one had, the federal government, the state had no problem saying Indian until Plecker. And so it's not as if there was confusion and Plecker tried to bring order to it. Indian was already identified. And going back to the Treaty of 1677.
Correct.
Plecker, it exposes the irrationality of the segregated state. There could only be two races. If there's 3 or 4, then there have to be 4 different school systems and 4 different water fountains. And this obsession with what they call purity, which is why they feared Indians were crossing boundaries to Plecker. That was tough. That was part of the inspiration for that law, which the state enthusiastically passed in the General Assembly. Famously, and then I'll shut up, but famously, since it declared anyone with any non-white blood was colored, that meant the so-called descendants of Pocahontas were no longer white. So in 1925, the General Assembly amended the law to allow for 1/16. I mean, it just illustrates the absurdity, the hate, and it's important that history be known because the legacy lives on.
So I have a question about then this sort of like intermarriage and genealogies, because in the book you write about how Monacan people have intermarried over time. You give examples of a couple of forefathers, Robert Johns and Thomas Evans, who married Monacan women before the American Revolution, and became important forefathers for you all. So I'm curious, because we've talked about race as the state and like Walter Plecker and the bureaucracy understood it, but I'm curious how it's understood or has been understood by the Monacan people. And I'm not sure, that's maybe too broad a question, but my question for you is, in your opinion, what makes someone Monacan? And how do you hold on to this identity, or how did your people hold on to this identity, even while absorbing these others, these outsiders into your group? Because, like these forefathers, they were not Monacan, but they became important to you.
But they had Monacan children. They had Monacan wives. They had Monacan children. I think being Monacan, and I can only speak for myself, is something you've learned, but you were born with it. You didn't know you had it, but you were born with it. It's your core. As the old saying goes, it's in your DNA, but it is what makes you who you are inside, in your soul. And every child, every Monacan child that's born has that. And you always celebrate the children, whether they had a white father or a Monacan father and a mother. Either way, those children are Monacan children.
Go ahead, Teresa.
Go ahead, Teresa.
Okay, I was gonna say, to me, being Monacan, it's about the community. The first time that I attended a function, I was born in Ohio and raised in Ohio, and moved to Virginia to participate in the tribal things, to just be part of the community. And the first thing that comes out of people's mouths is, who's your family? Who's your mom? Who's your dad? And
True.
you know, you have that connection through the community to be able to do that. And I think that's a large portion of what makes us Monacan is the community.
True.
Matt, do you want to add anything?
I agree with all. I think all of those things, to me, are what makes us Monacans. It is something that you're born with, but I think it's also something that that you maintain by keeping your ties to your people, by keeping your ties
Right.
to the place you come from.
Yeah, so it's something that you have to do. It takes, like, you have to work to be part of the community
Right.
too, to be claimed by the community.
And you know, I've seen people that their grandparents moved away and they come back, they've heard them talking about Amherst County and they left because of the racism. But, you know, it's something that's in you. And I think we all really want to know where we came from. Where was our grandmothers and fathers coming from? And, you know, that drives you to find out where you came from, who you are. And, you know, it is in your core. You know, I always tell children that God made us all. And it just happened to make some of us Native Americans, make others, you know, who they are. And we need to be proud of that. So our mothers and fathers, they protected us here in Amherst County more so than I think someone that moved away because of the racism. But, you know, they never said that they weren't Indian. They always stood up for that. And, you know, a lot wasn't taught to us, but, you know, as a parent, you do what's best for your children sometimes. But, you know, we never gave up at a little church, and we went there and we could be who we were without the outside world. And, you know, that kept a lot of us my age and a few years older and younger together. And, you know, that's what kept us going.
I have a couple more questions, but I also realize there's a lot of questions from the people, from the attendees. So I'm going to actually ask you some of those. And then maybe I'll finish with, I think some of them also correlate to questions I'd sent you. So there's a question about, you know, like the book ends at 2000, but can you tell us a little bit more beyond just federal recognition about the tribe since then, about the nation since then, about people, about both the accomplishments and the challenges you're facing today?
Well, federal recognition, receiving federal recognition, everybody wanted it, but we didn't know how to deal with it. So it's been a huge learning process on how we relate to the federal government, what we can and we cannot do. It's provided a funds for us to grow, to purchase a community center, but our heart and our core is always in Amherst, where our tribal center is and where our museum is and our log cabin. So I think it's brought more attention to us. More of our people have come back. A lot of think they want to get involved sometimes, but everything that we've ever done takes work and dedication. And if you're not willing to do that, then that doesn't, you're still a Monacan, but you're not part of the community. If you don't work at it, like Matt said, and work to be part of it, you're not inclusive. So a lot of people can say, yes, we have federal recognition, and it depends on how hard and how much they want to put into it. Nothing's ever given to you for nothing.
We do. Before federal recognition, the Monacan Nation was a nonprofit, a charitable organization that it was able to apply for some grants, but mostly donations. And our powwow every year funded the infrastructure of our tribal center and the museum and stuff like that. And it was a modest, a very, I would say, on the smaller scale of modest. We were able to pay the bills, and that's about it. With federal recognition, it has provided more funding for the tribe and more opportunities. But there again, you're dealing with the federal government. What we're doing with the federal recognition is building a small city from the ground up. You have to build that infrastructure. We have the opportunity to have through Indian Health Services, a clinic on our facility, and we have the ability to do a bunch of different functions in regards to the BIA, contracting with them to help build our infrastructure. But there again, you have to have people who are involved who know what they're doing for these types of things. So it's a growing thing from the 501c3 to the federal side. It's really a lot of work.
Yeah, from what I've heard you say, it sounds like it's a huge accomplishment, but brings its own challenges, because it's like now have to build the capacity to actually take advantage of all the benefits that come, or
Right.
that might come with it, or maybe a small group of people. Chief Branham, you were saying that it would be very difficult for you to be chief if you weren't also retired. So just the amount of work that goes into sort of doing just a lot. Another question, I'm just going through and trying to pick sort of the big ones. There's a question about the Monacan language. Has it survived? How has it been preserved?
Well, where's Matt?
Here.
The language as a whole, we say
It's there.
it's not, non-existent. We know that the Tutelo language is the closest language compared to the Monacans, but it's not an exact fit. And Karen Wood, before she passed away, she was studying the language, and she's the one that made that statement that Tutelo is the closest thing to the Monacan language. And we do have a few people that can speak some of the words. I think Teresa has spoken some, and Karen Wood could actually say a prayer or two in the Tutelo language. And Jeff Hantman, you might be able to elaborate on what I just said.
Karen had, we're all very proud of Karen, who earned a PhD in linguistic anthropology and made this question of Monacan language, Tutelo, Siouan, Eastern Siouan, Western Siouan, her research, and it's a sensitive question. What if a language is going to be revived, what language should it be? if it's Tutelo, that may be authentic to this region, and I believe that. But if you all recall George White Wolf, can I bring up George? And he felt strongly that since there's an ancient tie to Siouan, Western Sioux language, that's a more spoken language. So it's a complicated question. And I think that Karen did a survey, and most people felt, let's learn Tutelo to the extent we can, with help from, then I forget the gentleman's name who learned to speak Tutelo, but he has taught some and presided over the reburial and other ritual contexts.
Yeah, he was Okanichi. That was
Yeah.
John Blackfeather.
no,
Lawrence Dunmore.
Lawrence
Lawrence
Dunmore.
Dunmore,
Lawrence,
yes.
yes, Lawrence Dunmore.
I don't know if you're still working with him. So that's, it's all across the United States and Canada, that's a question. You know, there are very few places, especially in the East, where the language survived because from the colonists to the missionaries, it was outlawed or
Right.
purged. So picking it back up whenever that's possible, maybe somebody will, but it's a difficult question.
Matt or Teresa, did you want to add anything?
She's muted.
Go ahead.
Oh,
You two are funny. Yeah, like the chief said, you know, there is a list of documented Tutelo words that would have been used, but we don't have conversational abilities with Tutelos. People know a little bit, you know, yes, I did a greetings in Tutelo, but that's the extent of my knowledge, you know, a few words here and there. You know, and hopefully in the future, that'll be something that we can work towards, something. I don't know that we'll ever be fluent conversationalists in Tutelo, but enough to say things, and you know, I feel like there's a hole there, I think, in our community, and specifically in myself, to not be able to speak the language that my ancestors did. And I think if you can feel it to some extent, that it's a type of healing. Just, that's my opinion only. But I think we should definitely, we are moving forward, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication to do such.
There's another big question about religion and the role of, like, I'm going to add to the question, but like if there's a Monacan religion, and also the role of Christianity. You mentioned the church, Chief, but like the role of Christianity in the Monacan Nation today.
Well, Matt, who was on the call, I don't know if he's still on or not, but he does construct, conduct a sweat on our property, and I have sweated with him, and you know, I think it makes me whole. Now, I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and I'm still a member there. I'll probably be there until I'm gone, and you know, there are a lot of similarities in the two, and you know, my wife is non-native, and we always tease each other about it. And, you know, she said, you know, one thing I can't understand, what makes you a good person in your spirituality is also what we as Christian people consider to make you a good person. So I know ministers that was raised traditionally and would have been spiritual leaders, but they chose to go into the ministry. So, and they tell me that the parallels are so remarkable that, you know, it's just another way of praying God or the Creator, but it's just a little bit different. It's like a Methodist and a Baptist and Episcopalian. You know, they all praise to the same creator or God, but just different ways of doing it. And I think our spirituality, we talk about grandfather, and if you believe in Jesus Christ, who's his father? He would be our grandfather. So.
Want to ask some of the questions? I haven't had a chance to read through them all.
Yeah, I've been taking a look at these questions and I see that we have a common thread that goes through a couple of these, and it has to do with larger organizations in the community and how they might support. So we have someone from UVA and someone from the county public schools, and they're asking about what are good ways that those organizations might partner with the nation. And then Tish Jennings from UVA goes a little bit further, and she asks, we are concerned that UVA is not doing enough to reach out to the Monacan people to create opportunities for education and employment. What would you like to see from UVA, and how might UVA be a better community partner? And what can we do to help heal the hurt caused by UVA?
Well,
Yeah, okay.
I sit on a number of various UVA organizations, committees, and we are working on, trying to change the dynamic at UVA. Currently, the problem is there needs to be a focused person to deal with tribal relationships within the state of Virginia. UVA, you don't just have the Monacan Nation, you have 11 tribes. You have 7 federally recognized tribes, and you have 4 state recognized tribes in the state of Virginia. And so you need, these larger institutions need to understand that and try to build the relationships with the Native people, not just the Monacan people, but all the Native people of Virginia. I know this is about the Monacan Nation, but I'm plugging all the Indigenous people of Virginia. We've all been hindered in some way. As far as what you can do, depending on what the tribe needs. And that's where we should be setting the tone of, who can we reach out to when we need something, instead of we have a problem with a lot of people coming from the academic side saying, hey, I've got an idea for this great project. We would like you to help with this. Well, that's great. And I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth, but you're coming to us after the fact, after you came up with a good idea. You need to ask us what it is we need and see how we can partner that way and get the help that way. There is, I know that the county schools have been reaching out to the Virginia Tribal Educational Consortium. It is a unique group of the 7 federally recognized tribes working to change the school system and the criteria, the SOLs, for the Indigenous population, the 7 tribes, as well as the rest, the other 4, trying to change the curriculum, because really we're just a blip in time in the SOLs. Kids think we are in the past when we're really still here and have always been here. So the Virginia Tribal Educational Consortium started in 2019. It is a board member of each of the 7 federally recognized tribal members are on it, and they're pushing forward with working with the different school systems to change the curriculum. And I know Albemarle County has been really great in doing so. Also, Artifa and Siri have been wonderful in reaching out to us in doing these types of events, moving forward, acknowledging that, Albemarle County is one of the Monacan historical, in our historical territories. UVA is starting to budge on that, and they do a land acknowledgement, Kluge Rule and the Fralin and all of them, but it's it's slow going with the institution itself trying to push forward with with that. I am working with a couple of different groups, the Native American Indigenous Studies program, where I believe they just created 2 Native American study minors. And I'm also part of the Native American Student Union there, helping with that. So UVA is trying. They're a big organization, so it's going to take a little while for them to get it right.
Would you say they can do more in the way of outreach, middle school, high school, and then offering admission and free tuition?
Yes, definitely free tuition to Native and Indigenous Virginia students. There is a pilot program that we're working on with the Monacan youth that we'll be doing. They need a focused tribal liaison, a person whose job is dedicated to reaching out to the tribes of Virginia. I know Virginia Tech has done so. They have helped out. Virginia Tech has been working with us for over 20 years. So their admission policies are a little better. They have a liaison and all of that. So, Virginia Tech's a little behind. William and Mary, they're doing okay. I know that Vicki Ferguson and other Monacans been talking to, I think, Washington and Lee. And so they're coming aboard, but I think, there needs to be a major shift in the state government to institute, a tribal consultation policy that pushes down from the state government to these organizations, mandating, that they have a tribal liaison to work with the tribes. But that's just my opinion, and I think that's opinion of a lot of people. So, did that answer the question? I'm sorry, I talked a lot.
You gave us a lot of good information and sort of expectations that you have for organizations when they reach out to you. So I think that was really, hopefully that was really helpful for the folks that asked the question. There's one that I actually really want to ask because I think it's a good question. And also, Jeff, the person who asked it, it's Julia. She asked, as a nation, have you faced challenges deciding collectively the path forward, either with your decision to seek federal recognition or with other issues that impact all of the members? And so how do you make a decision that affects everybody? And how do you overcome potential conflicts if they rise?
Well, I guess the Monacans, we've had a lot of growing pains. With federal recognition, we became eligible for a lot of federal and programs that we weren't able to plug into before. But what we try to relate to our people and our members, that even though these programs are there, you still have to meet certain qualifications. And that's the hard thing to do for a lot of people. They say, hey, we're Native Americans, we're entitled to that. Yes and no. You still got to reach and meet certain criteria. And, some others have done better than others. And, and that's kind of separates us from some of the people. I tell people the only thing I will receive from federal recognition will be maybe some assistance in Indian Health Service. As I get older, I'm gonna need that. And that's where the clinic comes in. But, I look at the young people. Federal recognition has opened up many, many doors for scholarships where they weren't available before. So, we're trying to get them to, okay, look at this, use them. And, it's the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And we have some of that going on in our tribe, and I'm sure with the other tribes. It's just getting our people to realize these programs are there, but, you've got to go and apply for them and work with the people that are setting them up.
If I might jump in with this question. So first, the writer is thanking you all for presenting this information and sharing your time with us, and then goes on to ask, when it comes to oral histories, how did elders talk about overcoming the racist policies of the 20th centuries, going from the racist ID laws to the lack of sufficient public educational services to generally institutions keeping these histories hidden? And then what I think is, I would love to hear is what gave the ancestors and families the courage to keep fighting for the recognition?
I don't know if they did overcome. They may do. They held their families together the best way they could. Our people were orchard workers. They worked other people's land. They kept their families close, told their stories the best they could. And I don't know if they really ever overcame anything. They learned to exist parallel. They worked in the world to make a living for their people. The generations closer to my age, they all worked in outside jobs, but their parents worked in orchards and that type of thing. So to say they overcame, I don't know. I think they adapted. They made do. They had to take care of their families and raise their families. And they told the stories, and that in itself are stories to be told, is how they made do, how they went about surviving when they were persecuted from the outside. I think that shows a great core, great inner strength of our people to be able to do that.
Diane, would you agree that Peter Houck's book, which is mostly transcription of interviews,
Yes,
provides some of the answers to what you're asking? Very powerful interviews with people who are now gone about
yes,
how they made it. And Dorothy, what is it? Rosemary Whitlock? Is that?
yes, yes.
All her interviews with Bertie, with you, I just read through that again, and a lot of that is yes, I attended the school. Yes, I went to the log cabin school, and I had children, and how difficult it was. So some of that, not all of it, because oral history is very sensitive, but some of it has been transcribed by Monacan people and a very close friend to the Monacans, Dr. Peter Houck.
Yes.
So I recommend their books.
I want to speak about Dr. Houck. He was a pediatrician, and he was a doctor to our people's children. And he noticed that these children were different, I guess, than the other children that he took care of. So he was inspired to talk and to the parents and wanted to know what is the ancestry. And the parents said, we are Indian. And of course, that stirred his wanting to get involved and talk to the people. And that's why he wrote that book.
It's called Indian Island.
Yes.
But it sounds like that's the kind of, like, for him, it was curiosity and maybe respectful curiosity versus for someone like Plecker trying to get those names. It was,
it was
very
yes,
different.
yes. Dr. Peter Houck, he was a great man. He was a very generous man, and he became to know the community. And it took him a while too, because again, he was an outsider. So when you're coming into the community from the outside, you're not immediately accepted. But like my daughter said, who's your mama and who's your father and who's your grandparents? They want to know all that, but they want to know what your intentions are. Because, and there again, that shows you how ingrained in our people the fear of the outside world, if you understand that, how they want to make sure your intentions are what they should be for our people.
Because in the past, we have had people come to our community
Yes.
under the guise of helping, and they did horrible things, writing terrible books about people.
Yeah.
And so you have to be really careful about it. They're very, very careful about what they say and who they say it to. And rightfully so, because of those things.
It's a recognition, I think, that it's all like the relationship matters and how much you reveal and how much.
Right.
So it's not just asking questions, it's also taking the time to get to know our community.
Right.
Actually, this question, I think it leads nicely to this question from Vicky, who is an educator and is asking, how do we discuss the history and the effects of Plecker's legacy without inflicting or bringing up trauma for our Indigenous students and families?
I don't think you can talk about Plecker without it bringing up problems or concerns for a family. Like Dr. Hantman found out when he went to speak about Plecker and everybody got up and left. Well, today they know that they can talk about it and they're more free to do that because they're secure in the community and who they are. They've learned that most of us who are talking about Plecker are trying to correct the things that he did. So I think people now know what he did and know that what he did wasn't approved of. When it happened originally, you have to remember you're dealing with not undereducated people that did not deal with, I would call it the government. And that's what Plecker was to them, was government. They didn't know how to deal with that and they stayed away from that. So that to them, that was a law that they had to live by. Now they know that's totally different, and what he did was a horrid thing on many levels.
And you know, Indian people in general, they won't speak up a lot of times, especially the older ones. Now my generation's younger than me, and a lot of my generation will speak up right away. But you know, when I look at my mother and grandmother, they would not speak up against something that they didn't approve of, but their actions spoke louder than words. You know, they wouldn't. I'll give you a good example. We had a guy that came and ran the church, and he wanted to do this project. And I was in my teens, and I remember him talking 30 minutes after church one day about this project he wanted to do. Nobody spoke up. And he said, okay, next Saturday, we're going to have a work day. Everybody come in and do. You know how many people showed up that following Saturday? One, himself, because they did not approve of it. He didn't ask them, but he, like so many people, felt like he knew what they wanted instead of talking to them and asking, okay, how can I help you? What do you see as the number one priority? You know, and that's what happens to a lot of people. They want to help, but they don't ask, what do you need or what do you want? And a lot of times what you think they need and what they actually is their number one priority is totally different from what you think it is. And, you know, I always tell people, if you want to help, ask, how can I help you? Not, okay, this is what we're going to do. Because that just turns off Native people. They may not say anything, and you know, but they won't show up to help.
I would like to go back to the you know, there is no way to not talk about Walter Plecker and the racial injustice that have been perpetrated against Monacans and Indigenous people of Virginia. It's just not possible. But by speaking the truth and telling the truthful history of it, it should begin to heal. And if you do it in a manner that is, just a graceful manner, then it should be okay. If that teacher wants to talk about that history, I think she wanted to know how she could do it without creating any trauma. But I think if she does it in a tasteful manner, I think it shouldn't create a problem.
And I think the tribe itself made a decision when Plecker should be discussed, needed to be discussed. And that's not that long ago, but the impact has been great.
Yes.
So for those of you who are still with us, the books that have been mentioned so far during our discussion, we put them in the chat. So you should have the names if you are looking for more resources to learn about the Monacan people. And there was a question that I want to about powwows and homecomings being open to the public. I know that this year you didn't have a powwow, or last year, but in general, they are open to the public, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Maybe this fall, who knows if all things are right,
Right.
or if not this year, then next year. It is something that I hope to attend and see
Good.
for myself.
Good. We would
Well,
like for you to be there.
Yeah, we actually talked about that this past Sunday, and at the present, we are planning on having the homecoming. We don't know exactly how it's going to look. It all depends on how the vaccines and everything goes about, but we're looking to have the homecoming open, and it is open to the public. It's the #1 fundraiser for the church, and so we're looking forward to that. And next week, the 22nd, would have been the weekend of our powwow, and I'm missing it already. And this is the second year, and I'll be so happy when we can get back to doing that. It's a lot of work, but we really enjoy it.
I have one question that I wanted to, unless Jeff has something to say, I feel like you were going to say something. No?
Right.
I misread your expression. I thought you were going to say something. But my final question for you all, I guess, as we wrap up, is for the people here, or for all of us, if there's one thing you want us to know about the Monacan people today, how the group that's there, and like not just looking back, like you say, it's not just people back in the day, you're still here, you're present. What do you want us to take away? What should we know about you?
I want you to know that we're still here. We live right in the communities next to you. We have a functioning food bank that is available to Monacans and non-Monacans. And we have a museum where people can now come and see what our history is, but we're still here.
And I've lived in Amherst County my whole life, and I'm proud to live here. Even with all the things that were going on when I was growing up, a lot of change has come about. And I will tell anybody, we as Monacans want to be good neighbors, and you're not going to pull us over a crowd because we blend in very well, and that's a good thing and a bad thing sometimes. But we are like everybody else. There's not a whole lot of difference in us in the way we do our daily living. We go to work, we come home, we love our kids, we do what's best for our families. And a lot of us go to church on Sundays and, do the normal things that I consider good people do. And, not that all good people do these, but, that's what my feeling is about being a Monacan. Okay.
Teresa, do you want to add anything?
I think they covered it.
Jeff?
I've seen so many great successes leading up to federal recognition, getting the federal government to agree that ancestors who had been buried and undisturbed in Orange County are the ancestors of the Monacan people in Amherst County. That's
Yes.
a huge victory. The placement of the schoolhouse on the National Register of Historic
Yes,
Places.
yes, yes.
Look at the list of National Register sites in Amherst or any county in this part of Virginia, one plantation home after another. I'm right in the middle of it with excellent text. And Kenneth, I remember you there speaking on that day that we celebrated its opening. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. And the list is long of the successes you've had. The last 30 years are incredible. Native people often speak about 7 generations. I didn't know Claudie Branham, but Ron Branham took me to his house. And then I spent time with Ron Branham. And then I got to know Diane and Chief Branham, Kenneth Branham, and now Teresa. You know, that's more than halfway to 7 generations.
Yes.
That's right.
And you've done it. And it's on, I think the future, if I may, is incredibly bright. One of the most incredible stories of 600 Native American tribes across the United States, and especially in Virginia, which was so hostile to Native people. It's just an incredible story. And I'm thrilled to have been able to, watch it and see your success.
We love all of the stuff and all of the work that you have put in to help us too. Well, we won't forget ever.
Thank you, Diane.
Your
With the
family, Dr. Hantman.
Yes, he's family. Yeah, family.
Exactly.
I don't think you'll get me in the sweat, but
That's all
I'll
right.
be
You're
there at
still,
home. I'm always at homecoming.
you're still family.
Thank
And
you.
thank you all for taking the time to share like this incredible story with us, not just in the form of the book, which is, I'm sure, people, I got a question from some people who joined who weren't able to read it, but I hope now they go out and find it and read it. But thank you for also your time and your stories in sharing this. I think we've learned a lot. And, as a government employee, local government employee, I think we have a lot to do to sort of maybe address some of the historic wrongs and try to make sure that we remember that this was, not just that you were here, Monacan people were here, but that you're still here.
Yes, right.
That's a powerful reminder for us all that our work has repercussions that live sometimes beyond us. So
Well,
thank you for that.
thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank you.
having us.
Thank you. Bye, dear.
Thanks, Rick.
We've enjoyed it.
Bye.
See you later.
Doc.
See
Bye,
you.
Bye-bye.
Jeffrey.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you at homecoming.
See you
Yes,
for
I'll be
sure,
there.
if not before.